What would you do if someone took what was rightfully yours, without hesitation, for their own selfish reasons? The words echoed in Emma's mind as she sat in the living room of her apartment, staring at her phone screen. The text message she had just received shattered her world. The message was simple, almost cold, but the implications were anything but. "Hey Emma, I hope you're doing okay. I just wanted to let you know that Lily took the money you got from the inheritance. She's using it for her trip to Bali. She's been planning it for months." Emma blinked several times, as if trying to make sense of the words. She read the message again, and then finally set the phone down with a trembling hand. Her heart raced, and a feeling of disbelief washed over her. Her inheritance, nearly $590,000, was meant to secure her future. It was supposed to help her pay off debts, invest in her dream business, and finally give her the stability she had always longed for. Instead, it was gone. Spent on a trip to Bali. For her sister. The room seemed to close in around her. She could feel the pressure in her chest rising as the anger bubbled up inside her. Lily. Her younger sister, the one who could never seem to grow up. The one who always seemed to live in the moment, with no regard for the consequences. The one who had always gotten away with everything. Emma couldn't believe it. The betrayal stung in ways she hadn't expected. It wasn't just the money, it was the trust, the respect, the belief that her family, at least her sister, wouldn't do something like this to her. She had been there for Lily through thick and thin. Their parents had passed away years ago, and since then, Emma had taken on the role of the responsible one. She paid the bills, handled the legal matters, and ensured that everyone was taken care of. And this was how her family repaid her? Her fingers hovered over the phone screen, unsure of what to do next. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Her thoughts swirled in confusion. How could Lily have done this? Why would she do this? Had their parents' death somehow justified this? The message didn't mention any details about how Lily had managed to take the money. Emma knew there had to be more to this than she was being told, but she wasn't sure she was ready to know. One thing was certain, she needed to confront this. She needed to figure out what had happened. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm her racing mind. She needed to take action. She couldn't just let this slide. The money wasn't just a symbol of her parents' hard work, it was her future. If Lily had taken that from her, Emma knew she had to get it back. She picked up her phone again and called her best friend, Sarah, immediately. "Sarah, it's Emma," she said, her voice tight with barely contained rage. "You won't believe what just happened." As Emma explained the situation to Sarah, she felt a wave of emotions hit her all at once. Anger, confusion, hurt, all of them crashing together. She had never felt so betrayed, and yet a small part of her wasn't entirely surprised. Deep down, she knew that Lily was reckless. She always had been. But what stung the most was the fact that Emma had been so trusting. She had believed that Lily would never do anything like this, that their bond as sisters meant something. Sarah listened carefully, offering her support. "Emma, this is crazy. You have to do something about this." "I know," Emma said, pacing her apartment. "I just don't know what yet. I don't want to escalate things with the family. But I also can't just let this go. This money is mine, and she has no right to spend it on herself like that." After a long pause, Sarah spoke again. "You have to fight for what's yours. This isn't just about the money, Emma. It's about your future. You worked hard for that, and Lily can't just take it from you." Emma sighed, her anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I don't even know where to start." Sarah was quiet for a moment before responding. "Start with the lawyer. Get someone who can help you get your inheritance back. You deserve that money, Emma. And you deserve the peace of mind that comes with knowing you stood up for yourself." Emma paused, considering the idea. A lawyer? Yeah, I guess I have to. But what if this tears the family apart? Then it tears the family apart, Sarah replied, her voice firm. But this is about you. Don't let anyone take advantage of you. You've worked too hard for too long. Emma's resolve began to strengthen. She had always been the peacekeeper, the one who held the family together after their parents passed away. But now, she realized that she had been putting everyone else's needs before her own for far too long. It was time to fight for herself. "All right," Emma said, her voice resolute. "I'm going to find a lawyer." The next few days passed in a blur. Emma couldn't think of anything else. Her thoughts were consumed with the betrayal, the anger, and the mounting pressure of figuring out what to do next. She researched lawyers, trying to find someone who specialized in inheritance disputes. Every time she thought she might be able to relax, her mind would drift back to Lily's betrayal, and the fire would reignite. Emma finally made an appointment with a lawyer named Julia. Julia had a reputation for being tough, and Emma hoped she could provide the expertise and determination Emma needed to take back what was rightfully hers. As Emma sat in the lawyer's office, she felt a surge of hope and fear. This was it, the first step in what was sure to be a long, painful process. She wasn't sure what the outcome would be, but she knew one thing for certain: she wouldn't let this go. No matter what happened, she would fight for what was hers. Before the meeting ended, Julia gave Emma a piece of advice that stuck with her. "You're not just fighting for the money, Emma. You're fighting for your sense of self-worth. No one should be allowed to take that away from you." As Emma left the lawyer's office, she took a deep breath, ready to embark on the battle ahead. Her inheritance wasn't just money. It was her dignity, her future, and her right to be respected by her family. And she wasn't going to let anyone take that from her. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Emma sat on the edge of her bed, her fingers absently tracing the edges of a photo frame. The photo was an old one from before her parents passed away. It was a family photo, taken at their annual summer picnic. Emma, a bit younger then, sat beside Lily, her arm draped casually around her sister's shoulders. Their parents stood behind them, smiling at the camera, radiating warmth and love. It had been a simpler time before everything had changed. She had always been the dependable one. The one who stayed behind to help her parents when they needed it, the one who put her ambitions on hold to make sure the family ran smoothly. In the photo, she looked like she was full of hope, but if you looked closely, you could see the hint of responsibility in her eyes. Even then, Emma had taken on the weight of the world, silently determined to make things work. It was in her nature. Emma's childhood hadn't been easy. She grew up in a modest household, where money was always tight. Her parents worked long hours, trying to make ends meet, and there were times when Emma had to take on the role of caretaker for her younger sister. Lily, in contrast, had been carefree. She was the artistic one, always dreaming big and living in the moment. Lily had the luxury of being the baby of the family, always allowed to run wild with her imagination, while Emma worked tirelessly to keep everything in order. As they grew older, their paths diverged. Emma had always been the one to stay grounded, to chase after practical careers and long-term goals. She graduated from college with a degree in business management, and after a few years of hard work, she built herself a solid career at a small but growing marketing firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid the bills and gave her a sense of accomplishment. Emma never minded the hard work. She had been raised on it. Lily, on the other hand, dropped out of college early. She was always chasing the next big thing, creative, spontaneous, and often without a clear direction. Emma didn't mind at first. She understood that Lily had a different approach to life. But as time went on, Emma began to notice that Lily's lack of responsibility was starting to affect their relationship. She wasn't pulling her weight. She wasn't contributing to the family's well-being, and Emma, as always, was left to pick up the slack. When their parents passed away unexpectedly, Emma found herself thrust into a role she never asked for. She was only in her mid-20s, but suddenly, she was the head of the family. It fell to her to settle the estate, deal with the legal matters, and ensure that Lily and the rest of the family were taken care of. She took it all in stride, working long hours to keep everything afloat. Lily, however, did what she always did. She lived in her own world. She moved into a small apartment on the other side of town and continued to pursue her passions, mostly aimlessly, but Emma never complained. She understood that Lily had her own way of grieving and coping. She just wished Lily would take more responsibility for their parents' legacy. It wasn't until Emma received the message about the inheritance that she realized just how much Lily had been taking advantage of her kindness. The money Emma had received was meant to help her start a new chapter. Something that would allow her to finally live for herself. But Lily, in her selfishness, had taken it all. And Emma was left to pick up the pieces once more. Emma had always been the adult in the family, the one who sacrificed her dreams and ambitions for the good of others. She had always put herself last, ensuring that everyone around her was taken care of, even if it meant putting her own life on hold. But now, this betrayal had changed everything. Emma wasn't just fighting for money anymore. She was fighting for her dignity, her autonomy, and her right to make decisions for herself, without being taken advantage of. Her thoughts drifted back to the first time she realized she couldn't continue to live this way. It was just a few years ago, after she had spent a week working herself to the bone to pay off some debts. Emma had collapsed into bed, exhausted, only to find that Lily was out at a bar, enjoying life as though nothing had changed. The disparity between them, the stark difference in how they approached life, hit Emma hard. It wasn't that she resented Lily, it was just that Emma had given so much, and she was starting to feel like her efforts weren't being appreciated. Emma leaned back against her bed, her mind drifting to the moment when she knew she could no longer play the role of the good daughter. It was a quiet evening, and she had just finished signing the last of her parents' paperwork. It had been a grueling process, but at least it was finally over, or so she thought. She looked around her apartment, the same small one she had lived in since her parents' passing. It wasn't much, but it was hers. She'd worked hard to pay the rent every month and make sure the bills were covered. Yet, she realized that she hadn't taken a vacation in years. She had never given herself a chance to breathe. I've spent so much time taking care of everyone else, she thought. I've never thought about what I need, what I want. That was when the idea first took root. What if she used her inheritance not just to secure her financial future, but to finally create a life that was her own? Emma began to dream again, dreams she had buried under the weight of family responsibility. But those dreams had been crushed the moment she found out about Lily's betrayal. She had worked so hard for this. This money was supposed to be a new beginning for her, a chance to live a life that wasn't defined by sacrifice and responsibility. Now it was gone. Her phone buzzed on the table next to her, snapping her out of her thoughts. She glanced at the screen and saw that Sarah had texted her again. "Emma, have you spoken to a lawyer yet?" Emma smiled wryly, the weight of the situation suddenly hitting her again. No, not yet, she thought. But she knew what she had to do now. No more letting things slide. No more putting her dreams on hold. She had spent her life taking care of everyone else. It was time to fight for herself. Time to show Lily and the rest of her family that Emma had finally learned to stand up for herself. She wasn't going to let this betrayal define her. She wasn't going to let Lily or anyone take what was hers. With a deep breath, Emma stood up, the fire of determination burning in her chest. It's time to take action. Emma stood outside the lawyer's office, her heart racing in her chest. She had made the decision to fight, but now that she was standing here, the reality of what she was about to do was starting to sink in. She had always been the peacemaker, the one who tried to hold everything together. But the betrayal from her sister, Lily, was too much. She had to stand up for herself. As she entered the office, Julia, the lawyer, greeted her with a firm handshake. Julia was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, with short, dark hair and a steady gaze that immediately made Emma feel like she was in capable hands. Julia's office was sleek and professional, but it didn't feel cold or impersonal. It was a place where people went when they needed to feel heard, and right now, Emma needed to feel heard more than ever. "I'm glad you could make it, Emma," Julia said, motioning for her to take a seat. "Let's get right to it. I understand this situation involves your inheritance, correct?" Emma nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the chair. "Yes, I received $590,000 from my parents' estate, but my sister, Lily, took the money without asking me. She's using it for a trip to Bali." Julia raised an eyebrow, clearly surprised by the audacity of the situation. "That's quite a claim. Did she take it outright, or was there some kind of transaction?" Emma took a deep breath, feeling the anger bubbling up again. "It was a direct withdrawal from my account. She didn't ask, didn't tell me. I only found out after I got a text from a family member." Julia's eyes narrowed as she listened. This is clearly a breach of trust, and it may even be illegal depending on the details. "Have you spoken to Lily about this yet?" Emma clenched her fists. "No. I haven't been able to get a straight answer from her. She's always been unreliable, but this feels different. I don't even know how she got access to the money. It's like she just assumed it was hers." Julia paused, taking in Emma's words. "I understand. Let's break this down. You said Lily didn't ask permission. Did she have any legal right to the funds? Was there anything in your parents' will that would indicate she had a claim to the inheritance?" Emma shook her head. "No. My parents were very clear in their will. Everything was meant to be divided equally between me and Lily. But it's like Lily thinks that the money is hers because she's always been the one who gets away with things." Julia leaned forward, her expression turning serious. "It's important to understand that this situation goes beyond just a family dispute. There are legal implications here. If Lily took the money from your account without your consent, we could be looking at fraud or theft." Emma's heart pounded as Julia's words sank in. The thought of legal action against her sister seemed drastic, but Emma knew she had no choice. Lily had crossed a line, and now it was time for Emma to protect what was rightfully hers. "I don't know what to do, Julia," Emma admitted, her voice trembling. "I've always been the one who tried to keep the peace. But now I feel like I have to fight for this. I can't let her get away with this." Julia nodded, understanding the emotional weight of the situation. "I can help you with that. We can take this to court if necessary, but first, we'll start by gathering evidence. If we can prove that Lily took the money without your consent, we'll have a solid case." Emma looked at Julia, her mind swirling with a mix of emotions. Part of her felt relief, at least now she had a plan. But another part of her felt a deep sense of loss. She had never imagined it would come to this. Her family had always been her support system, and now that support felt like it was slipping away. The next few days were a blur of phone calls, emails, and endless paperwork. Emma found herself drowning in legal jargon, trying to wrap her head around the steps involved in a lawsuit. It was overwhelming, but every time she thought about Lily's betrayal, her resolve strengthened. She wasn't going to let this slide. She couldn't. Every conversation she had with Sarah, her best friend, seemed to revolve around the same topic, the inheritance and Lily's betrayal. Sarah had always been Emma's rock, the one who supported her through thick and thin. But even Sarah was shocked by what had happened. "You've always been the one to hold things together, Emma," Sarah said during one of their calls. "But this is something else entirely. I think you're doing the right thing. You can't let Lily get away with this." "I know," Emma replied, her voice tight. "But it's hard. I keep thinking about how everything used to be. How we used to be. I don't know if I'm ready for this kind of fight." "I get it," Sarah said softly. "But you've already been fighting for years. You've been fighting to take care of everyone else. Now it's your turn. You deserve this, Emma. You deserve to have your future in your hands, not in Lily's. Emma exhaled slowly. Sarah was right. She had spent her entire life trying to make sure everyone else was okay. But now, this was about her. She had to stand up for herself, even if it meant risking everything she had left of her family. The conflict escalated quickly. As Emma began gathering evidence and preparing her case, she reached out to Lily, hoping to have a calm conversation. Maybe, just maybe, they could resolve this without it going to court. She texted her sister, "Lily, we need to talk about the inheritance. I just found out you used the money for your Bali trip, and I need an explanation." The response came a few hours later, short and dismissive. "Emma, I'm just trying to enjoy my life. Why do you always have to make everything so complicated? It's just money. Chill." Emma stared at the message, her stomach turning. It's just money. To Lily, it was that simple. But to Emma, it was everything. It wasn't just about the money. It was about respect, about family, about trust. And in that moment, Emma realized there was no going back. She could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. This wasn't just a fight for money, it was a fight for her place in her own family. She was done being the silent one, the one who always gave in. It was time to take control of her life. The moment Emma made the decision to press charges against her sister, something inside her shifted. The fight had stopped being about the money. It was about reclaiming her life, her choices, and her dignity. Emma had been so used to putting everyone else's needs ahead of her own that she had forgotten what it felt like to fight for what was rightfully hers. She stood outside the courthouse, her heart pounding in her chest. The building loomed large, a symbol of the battle ahead. As the cool autumn wind swirled around her, Emma couldn't help but feel a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. She had never imagined her life would bring her here, standing in front of the very institution meant to administer justice, ready to take on her own sister. Her lawyer, Julia, had prepped her for this moment. "Just remember, Emma," Julia had said, "we're not just going to win this case because it's about money. We're going to win because it's about the truth. Your sister crossed a line, and you have every right to fight back." But the truth was, Emma wasn't sure she believed it herself. Could she really go through with this? Could she really face her sister in front of a judge, knowing it would forever change their relationship? The thought of it made her stomach churn. "Focus on the facts," Julia had advised. "Don't let the emotional aspect cloud your judgment. This is about your rights." Emma nodded as she walked into the courthouse, her mind heavy with doubt. She wasn't the type of person who liked conflict, and the idea of confronting her sister in front of a judge felt like a betrayal of everything they had once been. But she had come to understand that there was no other way. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was cold, sterile. The wooden benches, the gleaming tiles on the floor, the flickering fluorescent lights, everything felt foreign to Emma. This wasn't her world. This wasn't the world she'd grown up in, where family and love were supposed to come before everything else. But now, in this very room, everything had changed. Her sister, Lily, sat across from her with a lawyer by her side. Lily's expression was one of defiance, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Her usual carefree demeanor was gone, replaced by an air of arrogance and bitterness. The last time Emma had seen her like this was when they were younger, fighting over trivial things, but now, this felt different. The stakes were higher. As the judge entered the room, Emma could feel her heart race. She took a seat beside Julia, trying to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside her. The proceedings began, and for the next few hours, Emma sat through a barrage of legal jargon and testimony. Lily's lawyer argued that Emma was overreacting, that the money was always meant to be used freely, and that Emma had been too controlling of the inheritance. "Your Honor, my client has every right to enjoy her inheritance however she sees fit," Lily's lawyer said, his voice calm and persuasive. She was under the impression that the money was not strictly reserved for Emma alone, but for both sisters to use as they saw fit. Emma's hands clenched into fists as she listened. It was clear Lily's lawyer was trying to paint her as the villain in this situation. But Emma wasn't about to let that happen. She had the truth on her side. "Objection, Your Honor," Julia interjected, her voice firm and commanding. "We have evidence to show that the inheritance was meant to be split equally between both sisters and that Lily took the money without Emma's consent. This was an unauthorized withdrawal, and that constitutes theft." Emma's breath hitched in her chest as she heard Julia's words. This wasn't just a legal battle, it was a battle for everything she had worked for everything she had sacrificed. Her entire life, she had been the one to give. She had been the one to carry the weight of responsibility, of duty. But now she was reclaiming her power. The judge turned to Lily's lawyer, nodding for him to continue, but Emma could see the doubt creeping into his expression. The evidence was strong, and Emma could feel the tide beginning to turn in her favor. But just as Emma started to feel a glimmer of hope, Lily's voice broke through the tension in the room. "Emma, you're really going to do this?" Lily's voice was cold, accusing. "You're taking me to court over money? You're willing to tear apart everything we've built, just for a few $1,000s?" Emma's eyes locked onto her sister's. The bitterness in Lily's voice hurt, but Emma refused to let it break her. She had been the one to keep everything together for so long. She had been the one to make sacrifices, to care for their parents, to hold the family together when it all fell apart. Now, for the first time in her life, she was doing something for herself. "This isn't about money, Lily," Emma said, her voice steady despite the emotion swirling within her. "This is about respect. About trust. You took something that wasn't yours, without any regard for the damage it would cause. And I'm not going to stand by and let you get away with it." Lily's expression flickered, a momentary hint of guilt flashing in her eyes before she quickly masked it with anger. "You always act like you're so much better than me, Emma," she spat. "Always trying to be the perfect daughter. Always trying to be the hero. Well, I'm done with it. I don't need your approval." Emma felt a sting in her chest, but she refused to let it show. "I never asked for your approval, Lily. But I'm done being the one who always gives in. This is my fight now." The room went silent. The tension was thick, palpable as the judge observed the exchange between the two sisters. Emma could feel her heart pounding in her ears. This was the moment where everything changed. And as the judge called for a recess, Emma realized that this wasn't just a fight over inheritance. It was a fight for her own freedom, for her right to live her life on her own terms. It was a fight she couldn't afford to lose. The days that followed were a blur of emotions for Emma. The courtroom drama continued, with both sides presenting their arguments. Each hearing brought her closer to the truth, and yet the tension between her and Lily seemed to grow more intense by the hour. Emma had been steeling herself for this moment, but she wasn't prepared for the emotional toll it would take. It was the second week of hearings when everything took a turn. The judge had ruled that both parties would have the chance to present their final testimonies. Emma knew this was her moment, the moment she needed to confront the betrayal head-on, to lay bare the painful truth of what had happened between her and her sister. Sitting on the witness stand, Emma's legs shook beneath her. The courtroom was eerily quiet, the weight of the situation pressing in on her like a heavy fog. She felt like a stranger in her own body. This wasn't who she had ever thought she'd become, a woman who fought her own family in court. But here she was. Her lawyer, Julia, stood by her side, her presence solid and reassuring. "Take your time, Emma," Julia said softly. "Tell the truth and let the facts speak for themselves." Emma nodded, breathing deeply to steady herself. She had to get through this, for herself, for everything that had been taken from her. "Miss Campbell," the judge's voice cut through the tension. "Please proceed with your testimony." Emma took a moment, gathering her thoughts, before beginning. "My name is Emma Campbell. I am here today because my sister Lily took something that wasn't hers, something that my parents left for me. something I've worked my whole life to preserve." She paused, her voice shaking. "When my parents died, they left an inheritance. A significant amount of money. $590,000 to be exact. My sister and I were supposed to share it equally. It was meant to be something that would help both of us, something to honor their memory. But instead, Lily took it. All of it. Without asking, without telling me. She used it for a vacation in Bali. She didn't care about me, about what that money meant. She just took it." The courtroom was silent as Emma's words hung in the air, each one heavier than the last. Her hands clenched at her sides, the anger bubbling up once again. But now there was no fear. There was only the truth. "Lily and I have always had a difficult relationship. She's been reckless, careless, and selfish for as long as I can remember," Emma continued, her voice growing steadier. "But this was different. This was crossing a line. I've spent my life making sacrifices, trying to keep everything together. And when I needed her, when it was time for us to honor our parents' wishes, she betrayed me." The room was still, the weight of Emma's words settling over the crowd like a heavy blanket. She could feel her eyes welling up with tears, but she refused to let them fall. This wasn't about crying. This was about standing tall, about taking control of her life. "And what hurts the most," Emma added, her voice catching, "is that Lily doesn't even understand why this matters. She thinks I'm just angry about the money. But it's not about the money. It's about trust. It's about family. And I don't know if I'll ever get that back." For a moment, Emma's eyes met Lily's across the courtroom. The look in her sister's eyes was unreadable. Was it guilt? Regret? Emma couldn't tell. But what she did know was that the woman sitting across from her, this stranger in the courtroom, wasn't the sister she had grown up with. That person was gone, replaced by someone driven by selfishness and entitlement. Lily's lawyer stood up then, and with a calm and measured tone, began to cross-examine Emma. "Miss Campbell, is it not true that you've always been the one to control the family finances? That you've been the one who's made decisions on behalf of your parents, even when they were alive?" Emma's heart skipped a beat. She knew where this was going. It was true, she had always been the one to take charge, even when their parents had been ill. But she had done it out of love, out of a sense of responsibility. Lily had never been reliable when it came to family matters. She'd always been the one to leave things to Emma, to let her take the reins. "Yes," Emma replied, her voice steady. "But that doesn't give anyone the right to take what isn't theirs. My sister knew exactly what she was doing when she took that money. She didn't ask. She didn't tell me. She took it because she thought she could. Because she always gets away with things." Lily's lawyer didn't give up, pressing harder. "And you admit that you've always been the one to make decisions, to take charge, while your sister was free to live her life as she saw fit?" Emma's jaw tightened, but she refused to back down. "I've made decisions because someone had to, but that doesn't mean I've ever taken what's not mine. I never took money from Lily. I never betrayed her like she's done to me." The tension in the room mounted as the lawyer pressed on, trying to paint Emma as controlling and overbearing. But Emma stood her ground. She had to. She was done being the one who always gave in. This wasn't just about the money. It was about her dignity. It was about respect. The final moments of the hearing were a blur. The judge, after listening to both sides, called for a recess, and Emma was left alone with her thoughts. She could feel her emotions swirling, the frustration, the hurt, the anger, but also something else, relief. She had told the truth. She had finally said everything that had been trapped inside her for so long. And then came the moment she'd been dreading. The judge would deliver his verdict. Would justice prevail? Or would Lily walk away, scot-free, as she always had before? Emma felt her heart hammer in her chest as she waited for the ruling. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom felt like it was holding its breath as the judge made his way back to his seat. The echo of footsteps on the polished floor seemed louder than ever, and Emma's heart thudded in her chest. The final ruling would determine the outcome of this intense and painful battle, the fight for the inheritance, yes, but also for her dignity, her self-worth, and ultimately, her relationship with her sister. Emma sat up straighter, her eyes fixed on the judge as he adjusted his glasses and glanced down at the papers before him. She could hear the murmur of the other people in the room, their whispers fading into a dull hum in the background. In this moment, nothing else mattered. Her entire life, her entire future, hinged on what he would say next. "Ladies and gentlemen," the judge began, his voice stern yet composed. "I have considered all the evidence presented before me, and it is clear that there has been an act of misappropriation. The inheritance left to Miss Emma Campbell was intended to be split equally between the two sisters, and the evidence shows that Miss Lily Campbell took the funds without consent or proper communication." Emma exhaled a breath she didn't even realize she'd been holding. Her hands, still clenched tightly, began to relax, but the tension in her chest was far from gone. This wasn't just about the ruling, it was about what came next. "I hereby rule that the amount of $590,000 taken by Miss Lily Campbell for personal use without authorization is to be returned to Miss Emma Campbell with interest. And I will further require Miss Lily Campbell to pay any legal fees incurred by Miss Emma Campbell in this matter." There was a brief silence before the courtroom erupted into quiet murmurs. Emma's lawyer, Julia, exchanged a quick glance with her, a smile of victory barely contained on her face. Emma couldn't breathe. The weight of the moment hit her all at once, and she blinked back the tears that threatened to spill over. She had won. But even as the victory settled in, Emma felt a strange sense of emptiness. Yes, she had won the money. Yes, she had reclaimed her inheritance. But what did that really mean in the grand scheme of things? She had exposed the truth, and it had come with a heavy price: her relationship with Lily, her family, her sense of peace. Lily didn't say a word as the ruling was read. She didn't even look at Emma. Instead, her gaze remained fixed on the floor, her face unreadable. Emma had expected anger, tears, maybe even an apology, but Lily remained distant, as if nothing had changed. As the judge banged his gavel to end the session, Emma stood slowly, still processing everything. Her hands felt clammy, but she was strangely calm. She had faced the truth. She had stood up for herself. And now she had won. Walking out of the courthouse, Julia by her side, Emma couldn't help but think about how much had changed over the past few weeks. The person she had been before all of this, before the inheritance, before the betrayal, seemed like a distant memory. She wasn't the same woman anymore. "You did great, Emma," Julia said, giving her an encouraging smile. "This was a big win. You stood up for yourself, and that takes strength." Emma nodded, feeling a small sense of pride begin to stir within her. "I had to," she replied softly. "I had to stand up for what was mine and for what was right." As they made their way through the crowded streets outside the courthouse, Emma's mind drifted to the bigger picture. Yes, the money was important. She had every right to it, and the court had acknowledged that. But there was something more, something deeper, that she had gained through this experience. The truth had come to light, not just in the court, but in her heart. Emma had learned that standing up for herself wasn't just about fighting for money, it was about fighting for her voice, her autonomy, and her sense of self. And, most importantly, she had learned that her happiness, her peace, wasn't tied to what her family expected of her or to the sacrifices she'd made for them. It was tied to what she chose for herself. As Emma sat down on a bench outside the courthouse, the weight of everything seemed to lift off her shoulders. She had fought for what was right, and in the process, she had reclaimed her life. There would be no more giving in. No more bending under the weight of expectations. No more sacrificing her happiness for others. "I don't know what's next," Emma thought aloud, more to herself than to Julia. "But I know one thing for sure. I'm done letting anyone take what's mine. Julia smiled at her, nodding in agreement. That's the spirit. Whatever comes next, you're ready for it. As Emma looked up at the bright sky above, she realized something else. Winning the case wasn't the end of the journey. It was just the beginning. This victory, as sweet as it was about reclaiming her own power. And that was something no amount of money could ever take from her. Weeks passed after the court ruling, and Emma slowly began to rebuild her life. The money was returned, along with the legal fees, but it wasn't the money that kept her up at night. It was the rift that had grown between her and Lily, the painful, irreversible distance that no amount of money could heal. Emma's relationship with her sister had always been complicated. They had been close growing up, or at least, Emma had always tried to be there for Lily, protecting her, guiding her, and often sacrificing her own happiness in the process. But with each passing year, Lily had become more distant, more reckless, more absorbed in her own world. Now, with the inheritance case behind them, Emma wondered if anything would ever be the same. Would Lily ever apologize? Would she even acknowledge the betrayal? Or was this the final chapter in their relationship? One evening, as Emma sat on her couch, scrolling through social media to unwind, her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. She stared at the screen, her heart skipping a beat. The message was simple: "Can we talk?" Lily. Emma hesitated. She had been preparing for this moment, but the uncertainty of what it meant made her feel a mix of emotions. Anger, relief, curiosity. She wasn't sure what she wanted, or if she was even ready to face her sister again. She typed back a quick response. "What do you want to talk about?" A few minutes later, Lily's reply came. "I'm sorry, Emma. I need to explain myself." Emma stared at the message. Her mind raced. This was it, the moment she had both dreaded and hoped for. Could it be real? Could Lily finally be taking responsibility for what she had done? With a deep breath, Emma set her phone down. She wasn't sure what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain: this conversation would change everything. She needed closure. She needed to hear Lily's side, even if it hurt. She had to face the woman who had betrayed her, not as a sister, but as someone who had stolen from her and stolen her peace. The following weekend, Emma and Lily agreed to meet at a quiet cafe in the city, a neutral ground where they could talk without the pressure of family or lawyers looming over them. When Emma arrived, she spotted Lily already sitting at a corner table, her hands wrapped around a coffee cup, her eyes fixed on the window. She looked different, vulnerable, maybe, or maybe it was just the way the light hit her face, but there was something about her that seemed smaller. As Emma approached, Lily looked up, her expression unreadable. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice carrying a mixture of regret and something else, uncertainty, maybe. "Hey," Emma replied, sitting down across from her. There was a long, awkward silence before either of them spoke again. "I don't know where to start," Lily said, her eyes looking everywhere except at Emma. "I guess I just want to say I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I did to you. I never meant to hurt you, but I did. And I can't take that back." Emma's heart pounded in her chest, but she remained calm. "I appreciate the apology, Lily, but you have to understand. It wasn't just the money. It was the betrayal. It was the fact that you took something that didn't belong to you and that you didn't even have the decency to talk to me about it first." Lily nodded, looking down at her coffee. "I know," she said quietly. "I was selfish. I thought about myself, about what I wanted, and I didn't think about how it would affect you. I didn't think about what you were going through. I wasn't thinking about anyone but myself, and that was wrong." Emma listened, her chest tightening as the reality of the situation settled in. She had always wanted to hear Lily's apology, to hear her take responsibility, but now that it was happening, it didn't feel like enough. There was no undoing the damage that had been done. "I don't know what I expected," Emma said, her voice soft but firm. "But it wasn't this. I've been the one to hold everything together my whole life. I took care of our parents when they were sick. I was the one who made sure the bills got paid, that everyone was okay. I did all of that because I loved you, and I loved them. But when it came time for us to honor their memory, you didn't even think of me. You just took it. You took everything. Lily's eyes filled with tears, but she didn't speak. The silence between them was heavy, thick with the years of unspoken words, the years of Emma being the one to hold everything together while Lily drifted through life without consequence. I don't know how we can move forward from this, Lily, Emma continued, her voice cracking. I don't know if I can forgive you for what you did. Not yet. Lily's shoulders trembled as she wiped away a tear. I understand, she whispered. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. That I see now how wrong I was. Emma felt a pang in her heart. This wasn't how she had imagined this moment. She had wanted Lily to fight for their relationship, to make grand gestures, to make everything right again. But what she got instead was a quiet, humble apology, a recognition that things could never go back to the way they were. The conversation didn't last much longer. They both knew that this wasn't a resolution. It was a beginning, perhaps the beginning of healing, but it was also the beginning of a new chapter in their relationship, one that would be different from anything they had known before. Emma didn't know where it would lead, but she knew it was time to let go of the anger, to start the process of healing. It would take time, a lot of time, but this conversation had been the first step. As they left the cafe, Emma walked away feeling lighter, but also uncertain. There was no going back, but maybe, just maybe, there was a way forward, one that didn't involve resentment, one that allowed for growth. And as Emma stepped into the future, she knew that the most important lesson she had learned was not to rely on anyone else for her happiness, her peace, or her worth. That was hers alone. The weeks after Emma's conversation with Lily passed in a blur of reflection and change. She had spent so many years of her life trying to make everything perfect, trying to balance family obligations and her own desires. But now, with the inheritance behind her and the legal battle concluded, Emma was left with the question, what's next? The money was returned, the tension with Lily had been addressed, if not completely resolved, at least acknowledged, but Emma knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a new chapter in her life. She had won the battle over the inheritance, yes, but there was still so much more to reclaim. Her peace, her sense of self, and perhaps most importantly, the future she wanted to build for herself. Her first step was simple, moving on. Emma had always been the one to take care of everything, her parents, Lily, even her friends, but for the first time in years, she decided to take care of herself. She started small. She took up yoga to ease the tension in her body, which had been coiled tight for far too long. She reconnected with old friends, people she had neglected because she was too busy managing other people's lives. She even booked a solo trip to the mountains, a place where she could find some quiet and reflect on everything that had happened. At first, the idea of being alone felt strange. She had always been surrounded by people, her family, her work, her responsibilities. But on that mountain trail, surrounded by nothing but the beauty of nature, Emma felt a sense of clarity she hadn't experienced in years. As she sat on a rock overlooking a vast valley, Emma closed her eyes, allowing herself to breathe deeply. She had been so focused on everyone else's needs that she had forgotten about her own. And now, for the first time, she felt the freedom to just be. When she returned from the trip, Emma started taking bigger steps to rebuild her life. She hired a personal trainer and started working on her fitness, not to change her appearance, but to feel strong, to reclaim her body as her own. She enrolled in a cooking class, something she had always wanted to do, but had never found the time for. For the first time, she was living for herself. But even as she embraced her new life, Emma couldn't completely shake the feeling of emptiness that lingered in her heart. The relationship with Lily, though improved, was still fragile. They had made some progress, but the foundation of trust had been irrevocably shaken. Emma knew that it would take time, perhaps years, to rebuild what they had lost. One evening, about a month after their conversation at the cafe, Emma received a call from Lily. Her heart skipped a beat as she saw her sister's name flash on the screen. It had been quiet between them since that day, and part of Emma wondered if Lily had truly changed or if it was just another fleeting moment of remorse. "Hey," Lily's voice came through, tentative but sincere. "I just wanted to check in. How are you doing?" "I'm doing well," Emma replied, her voice calm. "I've been focusing on myself. It feels strange, but good." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "I'm glad to hear that. I've been thinking a lot about everything, about us. And I just want you to know that I'm still sorry for what I did." Emma took a deep breath. She had heard the apology before, but this time it felt different. It felt more genuine, less like an obligation and more like a real desire to heal. "I know you are," Emma said quietly. "And I'm still processing everything. I don't know if things will ever go back to the way they were, but I'm trying to move forward. For me." There was another long pause, and Emma could almost hear Lily's thoughts racing. "I understand. I don't expect everything to be fixed overnight. I just hope that one day we can get to a place where we're not just siblings in name, but in spirit too." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. The words were simple, but they hit her harder than she had expected. There was hope in them. Hope for something better, something deeper than what they had before. "I hope so, too," Emma replied. "But for now, I need to focus on myself. And you need to do the same." Lily agreed, and they ended the call on a somewhat positive note. Emma hung up, her heart both lighter and heavier than before. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew that she had to keep moving forward. For herself. As the months went by, Emma continued to grow into her new life. She wasn't the person she had been before, the one who always put others first at the expense of herself. She was someone new. A woman who was learning to set boundaries, to say no, and most importantly, to say yes to herself. She had spent too long living for others, and now it was time for her to live for her own happiness. But even as she found peace in her own life, she knew that her relationship with Lily would never be the same. Trust, once broken, could never be fully repaired, but there was room for growth, for change. Emma had come to realize that she couldn't control the past, but she could control her future. She didn't know what the future held, but she was ready to face it, no longer weighed down by the expectations of others. The inheritance, the betrayal, and the legal battle had been important, but they were no longer the center of her life. She was the center of her life now, and she was ready to make the most of it. As she looked out at the city from her apartment window one evening, Emma smiled softly to herself. She had reclaimed her life, and no one could take that from her. A year had passed since Emma had won her case and begun the process of reclaiming her life. So much had changed in such a short amount of time, and yet it felt like a lifetime. She had transformed from a woman burdened by others' expectations into someone who finally understood the importance of self-worth and personal boundaries. The money from the inheritance, while important, had almost become secondary. It had been a symbol of betrayal and loss, but now it represented something else entirely: freedom. Freedom to live her life without constantly looking over her shoulder, wondering if someone else would take what was rightfully hers. It was the freedom to pursue her passions, to make choices that were in her best interest, and to take the reins of her own destiny. One of the biggest changes had been in her career. For years, Emma had worked in a high-pressure job at a corporate firm. She was good at it, but the work was draining, and she often found herself working long hours just to keep up with the demands of her superiors. Now, with her financial situation secure, she had the freedom to leave that job behind. She didn't have to answer to anyone anymore, and that was a feeling she wasn't willing to give up. She began working as a freelance consultant, helping small businesses optimize their operations. It wasn't a career she had ever thought she would pursue, but it felt right. She loved the flexibility, the autonomy, and the sense of purpose that came with helping others succeed. More importantly, it gave her time to focus on her personal growth, time to build relationships, and time to travel. Emma had always dreamed of traveling, but she had never been able to find the time. Now, with her newfound freedom, she started ticking off the places on her bucket list. Italy, Greece, Japan, and even a remote village in Iceland. Each trip was a step toward discovering more about herself, about the world, and about what truly made her happy. Despite the distance that had grown between her and Lily, Emma found that she didn't need to have a perfect relationship with her sister to feel fulfilled. The process of healing had been slow, but both sisters were beginning to find their own paths. Emma had learned to let go of the past and to embrace the present, while Lily, for her part, seemed to be finding her own way. It wasn't perfect, Emma had accepted that, but it was enough. Emma spent time with old friends, people who had always supported her, and she made new ones along the way. She began to understand that success wasn't measured by the things she had accumulated, but by the relationships she nurtured and the personal growth she experienced. Her new perspective on life was not without its challenges, of course. There were still moments of self-doubt, times when the old feelings of guilt or insecurity crept in. There were days when Emma found herself questioning whether she had made the right choices, whether she was being selfish, or whether she was doing enough to repair the damage done to her family. But with every step, she grew more confident in her ability to trust herself. One day, as Emma sat in a small cafe overlooking the ocean, sipping her coffee and working on a proposal for a new client, she paused for a moment. She had come so far. The woman sitting in front of the computer now was someone completely different from the one who had walked into that courtroom over a year ago, fighting for what was hers. She had fought for something far greater than money. She had fought for her life. "Hey, you okay?" A voice broke her out of her reverie. She looked up to see Julia, her lawyer and now close friend, standing in front of her with a warm smile. Emma grinned. "Yeah, I'm just thinking. You know, it's hard to believe how much has changed." Julia sat down across from her, taking a sip of her own coffee. "I think about it all the time," she said, her voice thoughtful. "You've come a long way, Emma. But you had it in you all along. You just had to see it for yourself." Emma smiled, feeling a rush of gratitude for the people who had supported her throughout this journey. "I don't think I could have done it without you, Julia. You were there when I needed you the most." Julia waved her hand dismissively. "Don't thank me. You did all the hard work. You took the first step, and that's the hardest part." It was true. Emma had taken the first step, the step to fight for her own happiness, to stop letting the past define her, and to create a future that was entirely hers. And now, sitting in that cafe, watching the sun dip below the horizon, Emma realized that she was finally at peace. She didn't need to prove anything to anyone anymore. She didn't need the approval of her family or the validation of others. She was enough. And that, she thought, was the greatest victory of all. As the days passed, Emma continued to grow. She spent more time doing the things that made her feel alive, exploring new cultures, meeting new people, and deepening the relationships that truly mattered. She took risks, followed her instincts, and learned to trust herself in ways she had never allowed before. But perhaps the most significant change of all was how she viewed success. For so long, Emma had thought success was about achievements, recognition, and accolades. Now, she understood that true success was about peace with who she was, peace with the choices she had made, and peace with her future. One evening, as she sat alone on the balcony of her apartment, gazing out at the twinkling lights of the city below, Emma thought about how far she had come. She had lost so much, but in the process, she had found herself. She had reclaimed her power, her happiness, and her life. And that was all that mattered. Life had a way of surprising Emma. After all the battles she had fought, both in court and in her heart, it seemed like she was finally reaching a place of peace. But peace, Emma was learning, wasn't static. It was dynamic, a state of constant adjustment and growth. The lessons she had learned in the past year were profound. She had come to understand the power of setting boundaries, the importance of saying no, and the even greater power of saying yes to herself. But there was one lesson she hadn't fully processed yet: the ability to forgive. Forgiveness was something she had wrestled with for months. It wasn't just about forgiving Lily for her betrayal, or even forgiving herself for allowing the situation to go as far as it did. No, forgiveness was about freeing herself from the past. It was about letting go of the anger, the resentment, and the hurt that had been tying her to old patterns of thinking. It was about embracing the future, unburdened by the chains of regret. But that wasn't an easy task. One evening, Emma found herself at a small, intimate dinner party. It was a gathering of old friends and new acquaintances, people she had met during her travels and through her freelance work. The conversation flowed easily, laughter filling the air as wine glasses clinked and stories were exchanged. For the first time in a long while, Emma felt completely at ease, surrounded by people who cared about her for who she was, not what she had. After the dinner, as people were preparing to leave, Julia approached Emma. She had been her lawyer, but over time, Julia had become more of a friend, a constant presence during Emma's journey to reclaim herself. "Hey," Julia said, leaning against the kitchen counter, a knowing look on her face. "I'm really proud of you. You've come so far, Emma." Emma smiled, her eyes reflecting the warmth of the moment. "Thanks, Julia. It's been a crazy year, hasn't it?" Julia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I've been thinking about something. You've rebuilt your life, but have you fully let go of everything that happened with your sister?" Emma's smile faltered slightly, and she took a slow sip of her wine. The question was a good one that had been lingering in the back of her mind for some time now. She had moved forward in so many ways, but had she truly forgiven Lily for everything? "I'm not sure," Emma admitted. "I've tried. I've told myself that I've forgiven her, that I've let it go. But deep down, I think there's still a part of me that holds on to it." Julia watched her carefully. "It's okay to still feel hurt, you know. Forgiveness doesn't mean you erase everything. It just means you stop letting it control you." Emma's heart skipped a beat as she processed Julia's words. Forgiveness doesn't mean you erase everything. It just means you stop letting it control you. The clarity of it hit her like a wave. For so long, she had thought that forgiving Lily meant she had to forget what happened, to act like it never affected her. But forgiveness was not about forgetting. It was about choosing to free herself from the power of the past. "I think I'm finally ready," Emma whispered, almost to herself. "I think I can finally forgive her, not for her sake, but for mine." Julia smiled softly. "That's a huge step, Emma. You've come a long way." And in that moment, Emma realized that forgiveness wasn't something that happened in a single moment of clarity. It was a process, something she would have to continually choose, day by day. But she was ready. Ready to let go of the past and move forward into a future that was truly her own. The next morning, Emma sat down at her desk with a cup of coffee and opened her laptop. She had been thinking about this for a while, and today felt like the right time to take the next step. She drafted an email to Lily, short, simple, but sincere. "Lily, I've spent a lot of time reflecting on everything that's happened, and I've come to a decision. I'm letting go of the past. I'm forgiving you not because you need it, but because I do. I'm moving forward, and I hope that we can both find our way back to each other in time. But right now, I need to focus on my own happiness. I hope you understand." She hesitated for a moment before hitting send. It was done. There was no going back now. The weight that had been hanging over her heart for so long felt just a little bit lighter. Later that afternoon, Emma received a response. It wasn't long, but it was heartfelt. I don't expect forgiveness from you, but I want you to know that I'm so sorry for everything. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I hope one day we can rebuild what we had. Until then, I'll respect your space. Love, Lily. Emma felt a wave of emotion wash over her as she read the message. It wasn't the perfect apology, but it was a start. And that, she realized, was enough. She had done her part. The rest was out of her hands. As the days turned into weeks, Emma focused on continuing to build her life. She grew her consulting business, made new friends, and traveled even more. She had found a way to live on her own terms, with her own rules and priorities. There were still challenges, of course. There would always be moments of self-doubt and obstacles to overcome. But Emma had learned to face them with a calm resilience that came from knowing who she was and what she wanted. She wasn't perfect, and her journey wasn't over, but for the first time in her life, she was content. She had fought hard for everything she had, and she was ready to embrace the future with open arms. As Emma stood on the balcony of her apartment, watching the sun dip below the horizon once more, she felt a quiet sense of fulfillment settle in her chest. She was no longer bound by the past, no longer haunted by the mistakes of others. She had created her own future, and that was just the beginning. Emma stood at the edge of the rooftop, the cool evening breeze ruffling her hair, and for a brief moment, she allowed herself to simply be. The city stretched out before her, an endless canvas of lights and motion, symbolizing the limitless potential of what was yet to come. It had been a year since she had received the inheritance, a year since she had stood in that courtroom, fighting not only for her money but for her right to live on her own terms. She had faced betrayal, heartache, and a battle that had at times seemed insurmountable. But now, looking back, Emma realized that the inheritance was never just about the money. It was about what that money represented, the chance to reclaim her life, to finally break free of the ties that had bound her to a future that wasn't truly hers. In the months since her emotional and legal victories, Emma had learned that true freedom wasn't just about financial security. It was about choice. The power to choose her path, to build her own future, to create the life she had always dreamed of, unencumbered by the expectations of others. That realization was what had set her on a new path, one she had never imagined. Emma had found joy in the simple things, in the little decisions that made her life uniquely hers. She had discovered the beauty in waking up early to do yoga, in spending a Saturday afternoon baking new recipes, and in traveling to new places without feeling guilty about leaving things behind. She had found peace in the relationships she was nurturing, whether with friends who supported her unconditionally or with herself, as she learned to honor her own needs. And as the sun dipped lower on the horizon, Emma could feel it, the stillness that comes when you have nothing left to prove. She was no longer the person who would bend herself into knots to make others happy. She had stopped seeking validation from people who would never understand her journey. And most importantly, she had learned to forgive, not just Lily, but herself. It was an ongoing process, yes, but Emma felt more at peace with her past than ever before. A knock on the door broke her out of her reverie. She turned to see her friend Julia standing in the doorway, a grin on her face. "Hey, you ready?" Julia asked, holding up a bottle of wine. Emma smiled. "Yeah, I think I'm about ready to celebrate." Julia raised an eyebrow. "Celebrate what?" "Celebrate everything," Emma replied, her voice filled with newfound confidence. "The journey, the struggle, the wins and losses, and most importantly, the fact that I'm here, standing on my own feet, living the life I want to live." Julia's smile softened. "You deserve this, Emma. You fought so hard for it." Emma stepped back to let Julia inside, feeling a sense of gratitude wash over her. "I couldn't have done it without people like you by my side. I've learned that the people who really matter are the ones who stick around when things get tough." Julia placed the wine on the counter and poured them both a glass. To new beginnings, then. Emma clinked her glass against Julia's. To new beginnings. As they sat down together, enjoying the wine and the company, Emma reflected on the path she had taken to get here. She had come from a place of confusion, doubt, and emotional turmoil, but now, sitting in her apartment with a clear sense of purpose, she felt like she was finally in control of her own narrative. She had learned that life wasn't about what you had or how much you achieved, but about how you felt within yourself. And that was something no one could ever take away from her. She had the power to choose her next steps, and she wasn't afraid to do so. But as the days went by, Emma began to realize that there were still parts of her life she hadn't fully explored. She had created a new sense of normal, built from the ground up, but there were still dreams she hadn't yet pursued. Dreams she had put on hold because she was too busy managing everyone else's expectations. The career she had built as a consultant was rewarding, but there was a part of her that missed the creative outlet she had once dreamed of, writing. For years, Emma had written stories, short novels, and journals. It was something she had always loved, but it was a passion she had abandoned when the pressures of life and career took over. Now, with the space she had created for herself, she felt the pull to return to her writing. It wasn't about fame or recognition, it was simply about expressing herself in a way that was true to her heart. "I think it's time I gave writing another shot," Emma told Julia one evening, as they sipped wine and chatted about life. Julia, ever the supportive friend, smiled. "I've always known you had it in you. So, what's stopping you?" Emma looked out the window, watching the city lights flicker. "Fear," she said after a long pause. "Fear that it's too late. Fear that I won't be good enough." Julia shook her head. "It's never too late. If anything, this is the perfect time. You've worked through so much already. Writing is just another piece of who you are." Emma took a deep breath. "You're right. I've spent too much time doubting myself. I don't need permission from anyone else to pursue my passion." And so, Emma decided to write again. It was a slow start, scribbling down ideas, dusting off old drafts, and finding her voice once more. But the act of creating felt liberating. It reminded her of the woman she had always been, someone who dreamed, someone who could turn her passions into reality. Months passed, and Emma's life continued to evolve in beautiful and unexpected ways. Her writing began to take shape, and though she didn't seek fame or fortune, her work started to resonate with people. It was just one more thing she had reclaimed for herself, a piece of her soul that had been buried under layers of responsibility and obligation. And as the years went by, Emma continued to live a life that was fully her own. She found love again, in a quiet and unexpected way. She continued to nurture the relationships that mattered most and let go of the ones that no longer served her. She built a future that felt bright with possibility. But even more than that, Emma realized that her true success wasn't just about what she had accomplished or the life she had built. It was about the choices she made each day to live authentically, to follow her heart, and to refuse to let fear hold her back. Her journey had begun with the loss of something she thought was irreplaceable: her inheritance. But in the end, Emma realized that the most precious thing she had gained wasn't money, it was her ability to choose. And that, more than anything else, was her greatest victory. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?